So a week and a half ago, Pastor Raphael called me or sent me a text and asked if I could speak this morning, and he did not give me a topic. So I was thinking, okay, what topic could I talk about? And then I thought, there is one topic I am really, German humbleness here. German humility. Humbleness is not an English word, but German humility, both foreign words for Germans. But I'm going to talk about something that I'm really an expert in. So I did not need to do a lot of research, and I did not really have to read a lot of books, because I thought I'm going to talk today about failure. And so I just had to look into my own story and go like, oh, there are quite a few stories that I can share, and two things are going to happen. You either will say after the service, why did we listen to this German guy speaking? He is such a failure. Or you will think, well, if Phillip can make it being such a failure, there might be some hope for me. So of course I hope you will see that there is hope for all of us. Because I heard a long time ago that if you want to impress people, then you basically talk about your success. But if you really want to impact people, you talk about your failure. And so I want to talk this morning about the life after failure. Life after failure. Now, I was 16 years old when I was asked to speak for the first time in front of a room. And it was a room of around 250 students, high school students. So the worst group to speak to. And I was asked to speak for 30 minutes. And I prepared. I did not have a week and a half. I had 8 months to prepare. So I got ready and I got serious. And I got this message ready, and everybody had to basically listen to it, from my dog to my mom to a kind of the empty room that I was practicing in. I was ready to give that speech of a lifetime. And so as I was asked up to speak, and all of a sudden something happened that has never happened before or after. And I'm just afraid of talking about it will maybe trigger something. Because my left foot started to shake in a way that I could not control. Now, I never had that. And I don't know what happened, but basically it was shaking. Now, you would not really pick up on it if you don't pay attention to it. So people did not really pick up. But the problem was that when I Googled how great communicators communicate, they say you need to move, you need to engage, and I could not move. Because I was afraid that I would fall over the stage and off the stage if I would move. So I was standing there the whole time, not moving. But still, again, as a humble German, I thought I did pretty good. So I finished and I sat down, and the person that was the teacher next to me looked at me and said, "Was that it?" And I thought, yes, that was it. And he was like, "You spoke for 11 minutes. And I thought, I thought I spoke for like an hour. I gave it all I had, but it was done in 11 minutes. And said, yeah, that's it. So he went out. So I was the hero of the students because they had a long break. But that's basically how I started my journey of communicating. Now, by now, I've spoken live to around 500,000 people, and the feedback has gotten a little bit better. But it started with almost falling off the stage, wanting to give a speech for half an hour and only having basically 11 minutes. A few years later, after that speech disaster, my brother Chris, that many of you know, and we had this brilliant idea to start a side business. And so we produced a special product, and we borrowed money. We shot a video trailer. We got a website, we got ready for launch. I actually was afraid that it would attract so much attention that we tested if the servers would hold up all the traffic to that website. Now, we ordered 1,000 of these products, and we had to sell 250 in the first month to basically pay all the bills. And we had the great idea, and I will spare you the details of why maybe in hindsight this was not the best idea, to launch on the 25th of December. Because we thought people are just at home doing nothing. So the big day came after Christmas Eve, and we were ready and excited. I was refreshing the shopping cart every 5 minutes, waiting for becoming a millionaire and going to Mallorca. Well, I keep refreshing and nothing happened. The good news is the servers held up that day. I remember writing everybody I knew and I didn't know on Facebook, because you gathered all these friends on Facebook, and Facebook was back in the day still the place to be. Everyone I knew, I basically wrote a personal message. You know, now you call it spam. Back then it was kind of a marketing strategy to buy this product. Well, we sold 8 of the 1,000. Now, long before that, I already had been failing on a regular basis from basically first grade on. My handwriting was a war zone. My spelling was creative, to put it in a generous way. And when the highlight of your school year is no longer being the worst student in class, but only the second worst, you know something is going wrong. Eventually, my parents took me basically to testing, and the verdict was that I am dyslexic. The good news was that I was not stupid, which some have thought. Now, Einstein was dyslexic, Richard Branson is dyslexic, so I think, in decent company, even though it took me twice as long to read and become very creative in spelling. I remember the day a teacher called me up to write a word on the board. Now, if you're dyslexic and you have to read or write something, sweat comes all over you. And so I went up there, and the word that I had, and will only make partly sense, but those who speak German, it will be good. Okay, so the word was Bibliothek. Okay, library. In German, I should write Bibliothek, which is a fantastic, difficult word to write if you are dyslexic or not, if you are like a little boy. So I'm like trembling there, and I'm like, I have no idea where to start to write that word. So rather than writing Bibliothek, there's another German word for library, which is called Bücherei, which is much more easy. So I wrote Bücherei, thinking that they will not pick up on it. So the teacher actually was very impressed because of my creativity, but I even spelled the word Bücherei wrong. And so it did not really work. Now, I could go on and on about my failures. The day before Christmas, after months of overwork, my mind simply shut down in the middle of a supermarket, and I could not move for half an hour. And the days following were a nightmare. I had pushed too hard, and I had never experienced something like this. My mind just shut down. And then there was the time that I put the wrong executive in place, and it almost bankrupted us. And then there was the night when I lost 5 years of our savings in a bad deal, and on I could go. I told you, by now you think this guy is a failure up there, or you have some hope. Each one of us experience and will experience failure. Some of them are difficult, some of them hurt for weeks, some of them hurt for years. And the question is, what do we do when these failures come? And maybe you are in the middle of some kind of failure and you ask yourself, okay, how do I actually get out of this? What is the next step? So how do we deal with failure? What turns failure into a rebirth and what turns failure into a ruin? I love the Bible because the Bible is a story filled of people that God used in powerful ways, even though they had tremendous failure in their lives. You know, that's one of the reasons why we believe so much in the authenticity of the Bible, is because normally the heroes who make sure that the books are written portray a picture of only victory and heroism. But the Bible is full of people who actually failed in tremendous ways, and God used them in spite of their character flaws, their mess-ups, their failures, and their ruin. Noah got drunk, Abraham lied, David committed adultery, Job went bankrupt, Elijah fled in fear and despair, Jonah ran from God, and Peter denied knowing Christ 3 times. And on it goes. Now I want to give us 4 very simple ways on how we can actually deal with failure, that things that basically come out of my own story of how they helped me in a tremendous way to deal with failure. So the first point, the first way is turn your failure into a lesson. And we start simple, okay, but we'll go deeper. Turn your failure into a lesson. Now, Dan Sullivan has a quote. He's a respected entrepreneurial coach in the world, and he has a quote that says, and we have it here on the screen, maybe. There it is. Whenever something emotional happens to me, it stays with me until I can turn it into a lesson. Read that again. Whenever something emotional happens to me, it stays with me until I can turn it into a lesson. He describes people who can grow out of failure and through failure because they have looked at that failure or that emotional thing that happened and they've turned it into a lesson. When something painful happens to us, the emotion does not just disappear because we want it to disappear. It stays with us. It sits with us. It maybe wakes us up in the middle of the night. But when we can actually turn what happened into a lesson, there's something powerful that can happen, and we can actually get a little bit more freedom in that emotion. Another way to put it is unprocessed pain becomes baggage. Unprocessed pain becomes baggage. Processed pain becomes wisdom. If you have sat down with somebody where you feel like they have wisdom, I guarantee you it came through suffering and pain. There's something to be on the other side of pain and failure that has a depth to it that is not just a nice Facebook or Instagram post, but that actually carries wisdom. C.S. Lewis, and I have to quote him because Pastor Raphael is quoting him so often, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. There is a lesson that we can learn. Paul talks in Romans how suffering can be a lesson that ultimately leads to hope. Romans 5, verses 3 and 4. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. So I've learned and trained myself to ask this question after failure: what is the lesson? What am I need to take out of it? Not to say that everything happens for a reason. Okay, this is bad theology. There are some things that happen that are not good. They are also not in God's plan, because we know all over the Bible that there are some things that God doesn't like. It's called sin. It's called evil that are happening, and it's not something that He puts into our way for us to learn something. And still, there can be a lesson, even though there was no reason for the suffering. And there's no explanation, and it's not the will of God, but we still can learn something. So what lesson? That's number one. Number two is success is a game. Success is a game. Now, however you define success, I can tell you sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Doesn't matter how you define success. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Now, in my job, I help basically business owners grow their business and get out of the day-to-day operation so that they can work on their business and not just in their business, kind of building a self-managing business. And one of the key principles I tell them is we have to understand that business is just a game. It's a beautiful game, but it's just a game. Now, for many years, I lived in Mainz. Okay, Mainz is half an hour outside of Frankfurt. Gutenberg, the printing press, was invented in Mainz. So a lot of that, what happened in the Reformation, actually was birthed in the city of Mainz. And for many years, I lived in Mainz, and I loved watching the Mainz 05 soccer team. Now, if you know German Bundesliga, you know the Mainz 05, they don't win that much, but they have a lot of heart, okay? So every week I would go to the pub. Twice a year I would go into the stadium, but the stadium always took on a kind of a whole day, so most games I watched in the pub. So I would go and watch the game in the pub. And I have to say that I'm happy that back then, not people were filming everything, and social media was not as big a deal back then, because I'm a very composed person, but when I watch soccer, I can get a little bit emotional. I can say words that you would not expect me to say. I would say take things on a more personal level, that the referee really wants to hurt me. And so there were times when I get very into this. This was my 90 minutes a week where I was just like, I'm just going to cheer. I'm just going to go with the emotions. It was a good time. Now, I had this rule because I could get furious if we lost and if the referee did a mistake again. And if he did not see that actually this was a foul or this was a goal and was against us and was paid off by the other team, I would get so furious and I would get so emotional. But I had this rule. I had this rule that when I left the pub, I had to cross a street to go to my apartment. So my apartment was on the other side, right downtown Mainz. So I had to get out of the pub and cross the street. And the rule was, doesn't matter how excited I was or how furious I was, I'm going to leave the game on this side of the street. And sometimes I would be like, my head would be still red, and I would go over that street, and I'm like, oh, what a beautiful day. I'm not going to take, 11 people there on a field and a referee dictate how I'm going to enjoy my evening with my wife and my next day and my weekend. So I had the rule that basically, whenever I cross the street, I am done with the game. Now, to business owners, I'm saying the same thing needs to happen as a business owner. Business is just a game, and we need that street. If we take everything home, if our families basically are dictated by what's happening in business and happening in the job, employees, maybe that are a problem, business, a deal that fell through. If I take all of this into my family, basically it will just mean that at some point I will lose my family. Now, I still think it's a serious game. There are people depending on us, livelihoods. It's real, and I want to play it with passion, and I want to win. But when the game is done, it's done. And before you judge kind of business owners of how serious they are about business, I met some moms. Some moms who define success on how good of a mother they are. Now let me tell you from personal experience, parenthood is a game. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. With my 2 kids, this can all happen in 10 minutes. They can be angels and demons in the same half an hour. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. Now that doesn't mean that we should not be great parents and that we shouldn't raise our kids, but we cannot control all of it. So having this attitude of this is just a game, however we define success, this is a game, let's play it, let's be passionate about it, let's win that World Cup. But when we cross the street, we leave it behind. Be passionate, play hard, but then when the whistle blows, cross the street. Now these 2 points, which I really believe they can help us. Turning things into a lesson and making success a game. You can find them in some good self-help books. Now I'm all for reading some good self-help books, but the next 2 things, we're now taking it a step further and a step deeper on a spiritual level. Okay? And I believe if you pay attention to the next 2 things, they can dramatically change your life. And I'm not saying that lightly. The third thing of how to deal with failure is choose a testimony. Choose a testimony. Now, I remember a time when something in my business really did not work out for months. And I felt so frustrated, and I felt so angry, and I even felt like a big failure. I had tried multiple angles, and it did not work. It was kind of like a dark cloud over my head. I even remember telling my wife that when she asked me how I was doing, I told her, I'll never really be happy until I solve this. Now, before you judge me, maybe this is where you are today. Maybe it's not something in your business. Maybe it's your health. Maybe something in your marriage. Maybe something with one of your children. Maybe there's financial pressure. And it's so heavy, there's such a heavy cloud over you that you really, even if you don't say it, in your gut you believe it. If this does not get solved, I will never really be happy again. I will never really be able to sing and rejoice. Now, I was sitting in church during that time one Sunday morning, and God took me to school. Now, it had nothing to do with the pastor who was basically preaching that morning. I don't even remember what was happening, but basically God was starting to talk to me, and we were discussing my problem. And so he was kind of saying, Philip, you are going to praise me if I solve this one thing for you? And I'm like, yes, I will praise you. I will praise you, and I will have a testimony of how you rescued me out of the desert and led me into the promised land. This will be my testimony. And then I really felt God pushing me and saying, Philip, the real testimony is not that you can be content when it is solved. The real testimony is now choosing to be content even though it is not solved. It's easy to actually praise God when you get the miracle. But true faith is actually being content even though it is not solved yet. So I remember making that day a choice to say, I'm going to have a testimony that once it's solved, I can say, I am content, I am happy, but not because it was solved. I even was content and happy in the midst of that frustration, that pain, that suffering that was very real. And I don't know what happened, but something truly switched because if you're honest, at least if I'm honest, it's always one more thing that you think will make you happy. And when you get it, you go like, oh, that's the next thing. It's the next thing. And even, we sometimes as Christians, we sometimes, oh, this is so worldly. People are running after material things to make them happy. And we do that in the same with different categories. We just think if this happens, if God gives me this, if this miracle happens, if this is solved, then I am happy. But the true power is, and the true miracle is that we actually have the Spirit of God living in us, making us content, even though everyone around us should look at us and go like, why in the world is this guy smiling? There is no reason. There is no reason. We can put it like this. The heroes of faith are not the ones who praise God after an amazing healing, but those who keep trusting in God in their pain and in their suffering. Now, for me, this was a game changer. Now, the great apostle Paul said, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I can do all this. Another translation, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Now, I heard a pastor who told the church one Sunday that he needs somebody to play the piano next week because they kind of lost their piano player for that week. And after church, a woman came up and said, I can play piano for you next week. And he was very excited that his problem was solved. But then because he had been a pastor for many years, he actually asked a very important question, like, do you actually know how to play the piano? And she looked at him and said, no. And she got, no? And then she quoted this verse, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. And I have heard this verse misquoted in so many ways of us believing we can do something because God gives us the power to do something. Now, this might all be nice, but this has nothing to do with this verse. Okay, let's read the verse before this famous verse. I know, this is the Apostle Paul talking now, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether in failure or success, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this. I can be content through Christ who actually gives me that strength. That is the power that we have. That it's not that we are content when we get what we need, but that we can be content in spite of not having what we want. Number 4, the last point. Believe that God has a trick up his sleeves. Now, for me, this is the most important thing this morning. And it's actually the reason we should go on, even though we feel maybe that there is no reason to go on. Because it's the reason we actually can have hope. Now, there is a very old poem that we find in the beginning of the Bible, the Jewish scripture, the Genesis, which is known as the creation story, but if you read it in the original language, it's not a story, it's actually a poem. It's the creation poem. Now, I have heard many sermons on the creation story and the creation account, but there's one I still remember because the pastor made the point that I actually never had considered about this. He explained that the creation poem starts with a description of chaos, of darkness, and an earth that was desolated and empty. And then the poem, if you read the first 3 chapters of the Bible, unfolds and water is introduced. Now, water and the ocean, there was a symbol deeply unsettling to the people at the time, because in ancient cultures, water was associated with the darkness, the unpredictability and danger. The beasts, the evil spirits, the dragons were being in the water. And when we hear something where it is associated with chaos, darkness, we all of a sudden in that poem hear this twist that the Spirit of God is hovering over that water, over that chaos. God's Spirit is not removed of the chaos, it's actually hovering over the chaos, over the mess. But not only God's Spirit is hovering over the chaos, the author of the poem goes even further to explain that out of that chaos and out of that darkness, God is creating something new, something wonderful, something beautiful, a whole new creation that he keeps talking about being good, being very good. Now, I love this image because the poet describes that all beauty of this world was created out of misery and chaos and darkness. Now, we all know chaos and water, basically. We all have that in our own lives, the failure, the pain, the hopelessness, the suffering, the wounds that have not been healed yet. And the beautiful message is that even in all that chaos and all that failure that maybe you're experiencing right now, the Spirit of God is hovering and he has a trick up his sleeve. And the trick is that he can turn this into something beautiful. He can do a new creation job. He can do a Genesis all over again. Now, if you don't believe me, just do a quick test. In retrospect, in your own life, think of something tragic that you've experienced. And somehow looking back on it, you somehow see, even though it was tragic, even if it was painful, something beautiful came out of it. Almost everyone I ask has a profound story about that. Not that the failure was a joy or that we hope it would happen to anybody else, but we still would not choose for it to have been taken away, because what came out of it was deeper and richer. You maybe became a more deeper and more compassionate person because of it. Which brings me basically to the Paschal mystery. Now, the Paschal mystery in Christian theology is generally understood as the mystery of the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, of what we celebrate on Easter. Now, the church father Augustine called the Paschal mystery not only what God did with Jesus on Easter, his death and resurrection, but he also actually said that this mystery is what is happening all around us, through all of creation, all the time. Augustus believed that the Paschal mystery is all around us. We see it in our own lives and in the lives around us. The process of dying and rising again, of death and new life. We see it in the seasons. Sometimes in Mallorca more than, sometimes in Mallorca not as much as in other places. Summer is bright and full of life, and then the fall gets colder and the leaves of the tree fall away and die. Winter is dark and it seems that all growth and life is put on pause and everything is dead. But then the first warm sunlight. You know, if you are in Germany, I owned a coffee shop back then in Mainz, and we had some sun places outside, and there was just one little piece of sun that came, and the Germans sat there with their espresso and their coffee, you know, worshiping that one piece of sun that came after that long, long winter. All of a sudden, new life is bursting forth. The same is happening when we sleep. Doesn't matter how many energy drinks you drink or how much coffee you drink, your body at some point will say, enough is enough. We're going to sleep. And you kind of die until the next morning When you wake up again. Or when you get a little older, you wake up twice in the middle of the night. It's a mini resurrections. And go to the bathroom. So if we have eyes to see, we actually see it all over the place. Death and resurrection. The Paschal mystery is the deep mystery that this is not only the circle of life, but that our hope is that somehow God is going to transform all of the failure, all of the suffering, all of the misery, all of the pain into something beautiful, into a new creation. He's somehow hovering over that suffering, the injustice and oppression, and he's bringing forth new life out of it. He's busy preparing for springtime. He's preparing for new life to break through the clouds. The Bible goes even so far in 2 Corinthians to say that God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself. Even through an innocent man dying on the cross, the ultimate image of chaos, evil, and failure. God brings forth something beautiful, something amazing. The cross is transformed into something that is the salvation of the world. He reconciled the world to himself while hanging on the cross. God is in Christ on the cross, transforming even the cross to something glorious. So this Paschal mystery is a profound mystery of all of our lives because it indicates that God can and will transform our dark times and our failures. The night, the winter, the pain is not the end of the story. And the mystery is true for your personal life, your spiritual life, and for all of creation. Romans 8:28, and we know that for those who love God, all things, and I looked it up in Greek, it says, all things work together for good. All things. All your failure. It does not say that God wanted these failures. It does not say that it was God's plan, but God has this trick up his sleeve to turn it all for good. The Franciscan Richard Rohr said it this way: if all these crucifixions, death, crisis, disappointments, doubts, fear, injustice, suffering, lead to a possible resurrection and are not a dead-end tragedy, that changes everything. That is the hope of the Christian faith. That's why I love the cross so much. Because the cross, number one, says, I know how you feel. You're not alone in your suffering. God actually came and started to suffer alongside of us. You're not alone in your suffering. I've been there and I'm sorry. It is tough. But number two, your suffering and your pain is not the end of the story. There's hope. There will be a happy end. There is new life around the corner. Resurrection is going to come. Easter Sunday is around the corner. Now I have to be honest and not spread false hope. I've been around for a few years and experienced many of these resurrections in my own life and the lives around many around me. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, and yes, sometimes even years for this Paschal mystery to manifest itself. And to be really honest, sometimes it will never happen in this lifetime. The Paschal mystery is the mystery because we don't have the promise that everything will work out in our own lifetime if we just pray more and believe more. Even the people who've experienced the greatest healing stories get sick again and die at some point. That is why we have the hope that exceeds our lifetime. So if you are still yearning, praying, and hoping for this resurrection party, be assured, as Christ has risen, your failure will rise to a new life and a new creation, now or in the day to come. But there is some sun coming. There is some sun coming. There is some hope on the horizon. The summer is not there yet, but we know the sun is there. And it's coming. God is doing something. That's actually what we celebrate on Pentecost. That God, the Son, in the Spirit of God, now is basically already giving this assurance that what he has done in Christ, he is going to do with all of creation. And that's what I try to remember when the failure is real. What is even more real is that there's hope that God has a trick up his sleeves. As we're going to sing the last song and the music team can come up, we want to invite you to make this a time of prayer. If you are carrying some kind of failure this morning, there's an invitation. And the invitation is basically a choice to kind of sit with it alone, lick your wounds, become consumed maybe by revenge because somebody else was the reason for your failure. Move it under the carpet, saying it's not a big deal. Sit in self-regret because you messed up again. Or the option is to actually give it to God. To actually say, God, here it is. I'm choosing a testimony now, not later. God, I want to trust you that there is a resurrection coming. So as we sing, bring your failure, your chaos, your suffering to him. Because he's the ultimate God who can actually transform it into new creation and new life.